Joe Biden defends his record on race. Did Don Jr. just revive some birtherism-esque stuff with Senator Kamala Harris? And post-Democratic debate polling shows some changes in the field. We got breaking news on that front. And also, Mayor Pete's war chest is growing massively.
Team Rising is here. Keneisha Grant is an assistant professor of political science at Howard University. She's also the author of The Great Migration and the Democratic Party. Madeline Osburn, staff writer and producer at The Federalist. Welcome to you both.
Thank you.
So we have a lot with some very interesting new polling numbers, both from Morning Consult and our very own Hill Harris X poll. The top line takeaways: Biden fallen 2 points, Sanders -2. We should mention the margin of error is I think 4.8%.
Yeah.
Kamala Harris is +6. That's a very significant number. Warren +2. Buttigieg +2, and Beto -2.
And the big headline: Harris pulling into third over Warren in fourth. And this again is in our Hill Harris X poll. Morning Consult found something similar, but they
also had Harris +6, and they had Warren, but they had them tied at 12% each. Keneisha, what do you think this is a reaction to? Is this just the debate numbers, or is it a falling out of faith with Joe Biden? Because we should mention in the Morning Consult poll in particular, this is a plus or minus 2%. He was -5. So a lot of that support went from Joe Biden to Kamala Harris.
Yeah, and that report also shows what people are thinking before the debate happens. And so I think this is actually a direct result of the debate. We talked about people, how they felt before. We talked about how they felt afterwards. And they feel more comfortable with Harris after the debate than they did before. And I think more worried about Joe Biden at the debate than they did before.
Madeline, what do you think?
I think it's a lot more name recognition for Kamala. A lot of people who aren't from California or that coast probably weren't even. Yeah, she had a huge Google Trends result, so people were getting more familiar with her.
Tulsi did have a very interesting. I think more about it is, what does this tell us about the types of voters that are drifting to different places? So, Keneisha, in this particular one, it seems that Warren and Joe Biden suffered the most to Kamala Harris.
Yeah.
But not necessarily with African American voters.
Yeah.
If anything, what Crystal and I think is it's white liberal women.
White liberal women
who are flocking to Kamala after this.
I think you have that right, actually. And I think that the thing that's happening with race is going to be complicated, so I'll be interested to see how those numbers comes out.
Complicated how?
Complicated because I think there's an interaction of race and age that we need to talk about, and the generational differences that folks have. And so I think that some of the initial results might be, this is what black people are thinking, and this is how they feel about Joe Biden, when in fact it might be, this is what older black people think, and younger black people, especially the activist types, have a different kind of view of what's happening in this situation.
And why would that be different? We had Michael Steele on, who's former RNC chair, and he said something different, very similar, that he had spoken with a number of older African Americans, and they felt that Senator Harris had been sort of out of line in her attack on Joe Biden.
Yeah, I think you have to think about kind of how the millennials come of age. You come into the political process when Barack Obama is the president and Donald Trump follows him. And so these notions that some older black people have, or some older people in general have, about how you respect people and how you talk to them and whether you're responsible to treat them in a certain way, don't exist for younger people. We don't have this notion that we have to respect Joe Biden just because he was vice president. Everybody can be called to the carpet about what they did in the past or at any time in the present. And I think that's the kind of thing that's different. And that might come out in further polling about black people.
That's a very good point. Let's take a listen to what Joe Biden and how he defended himself.
I heard and I listened to and I respect Senator Harris. But, we all know that 30 seconds to 60 seconds on a campaign debate exchange can't do justice to a lifetime committed to civil rights.
He's going to save himself there, Madeline? I'm not so sure.
I think that they're going to continue to hit him not just on age, but this baggage that he carries, right? That comes with age. He has, 40 plus years of experience with the crime bill and on busing, and that's what the younger candidates are going to hit him on.
Well, and that's what one of the campaign operatives that I talked to right after the debate, basically they were like, oh, this is an effective way to get under Vice President Biden's skin.
Right.
Challenge him on an old thing and watch him sort of like dig
melt.
his own grave, right? I mean, so what I've been saying is it's less about the particular issue of busing, which feels like a very dated issue to people, even though I would say it's still relevant today. There's a lot of school segregation. That being said, I think it's more about this armor of electability
Right.
being worn down a little bit, and people looking at Senator Harris, looking at some of the other competitors and saying maybe they would be the better ones, the more able ones to go up against Trump.
Right. I think these things from the past kind of show what Biden said himself, my time's up.
Right.
Like, you have to be able to speak to what you did over the 40 years. You can't be making the case that you have all this experience and you should trust me because of the experience, and then not want to be accountable for the things that happened in the past. I don't think you can have it both ways, and I think that's going to be his major problem.
Well, I think, Madeline, this is one thing I would like to hear your thoughts on, is how this compares to 2016. We have all these candidates, and it really does make it so that it was like Chris Christie and Marco Rubio. It was like Chris Christie's basically like a suicide bomber who like goes in and takes out one of the front runners, opening up spaces, within the field. So much of these opportunities and interlocking things make it so that it really is anybody's race or anybody's debate, especially so far out.
Yeah, I think Eric Swalwell was our suicide bomber.
Yeah, right.
He was the one that called Biden out first on the age thing,
Although we should
right?
say much less effective than Chris Christie.
Yes, way less.
Yeah.
Yeah, but Swalwell did that very thing. He did that narrative about how a politician told him he was passing the torch, and that politician was Joe Biden. And so, compared to 2016, age is an easy thing to hit people on. People criticized Bernie and Hillary and Trump for their age and their health issues, and so it's an easy hit.
Yeah, I mean, they do open themselves up to it.
And yet, Joe Biden keeps being Joe Biden, right?
Yeah.
He keeps rolling out the hits. Every time he starts, every time he starts to talk about race, I start to get uncomfortable because he just doesn't use the language that you necessarily want him to use. And on that point, speaking in Chicago on Friday about the need for criminal justice reform, Biden said, quote, "That kid wearing a hoodie may very well be the next poet laureate and not a gangbanger," which again made some people uncomfortable and unhappy. Keneisha,
Why
I mean,
did
did
he talk this way?
Because hoodies are exclusively black, right? Nobody
that's
else.
what
Nobody else.
Exactly. There's so much to unpack in that comment. But it's just like, why? Like, why would you speak this way?
Yeah, I think that he just comes from a different era, and I don't think that he has really been held accountable for his actions in a public way. At this point, he's been the Vice President of the United States for 8 years in office and 4 since, and he's just not used to people questioning him, and so I don't think that he has to deal with things. I think another thing that's interesting is many of these candidates have been apologizing. Hey, I said I was Native American, DNA test says I'm not, I'm sorry. And Joe Biden doesn't have the I'm sorry
Well, she hasn't
thing.
really said I'm sorry,
Well,
but yeah.
Something
She has
like,
said I'm not Native American, which I guess is her version.
Or Mayor Pete says,
Yeah.
we got it wrong with
Right.
the policing thing.
Right.
And we have work to do. I think that somebody has to get him to understand that you just say you're sorry.
Well,
learn from the stuff.
He
The
could have
funny part,
diffused
though-
it so easily.
Right? Isn't that the funniest part,
So
Madeline?
easily.
His own team is leaking about how he is obstinate, he won't change, about how his own debate performance is a disaster. Whenever that's happening this early, I mean, this is Jeb 2016 all over again.
Yeah, but at the same time,
Yeah.
I kind of think that it's a problem of, is Joe Biden ever going to be woke enough? I think that he's not far left for the rest of the most vocal part of the Democratic Party, and this is kind of where the left eats its own tail. Like, is anyone ever woke enough? Like, you can always hit them on whatever language you want, like saying a hoodie is a dog whistle, and it's like, that kind of takes away from other real issues of race in our country.
Yeah.
Things that, it's a dog whistle to who? People who think those words are racist?
I don't think it's too much to ask for the Democratic nominee for 2020 to have rethought their position in opposition to busing at this point.
I absolutely agree.
I think that's a pretty low bar. And not to mention the crime bill in the 90s,
Right.
which he was not just, one of many who voted for it, but he was the lead guy on it, and he really hasn't reckoned with that either.
Right. I think the thing that people are forgetting about 2016 is that people can stay home. Right? We had some issues with Russian interference with African American voters in particular, and the worry that they were depressing the vote, but there were also some people who just weren't excited about Hillary Clinton. And I think if Joe Biden wants to be serious about having black people in his base and having them turn out, he has to get this stuff right.
I have made that point many times here, which is that African American voters are them staying home in Pennsylvania alone is what cost Hillary the election. So it actually is not just as important to find somebody who has supported the Democratic Party, but can actually drive out the number of voters that are traditionally within their base. I also do want to talk about Senator Harris. There was a tweet from the president's son, Donald Trump Jr., saying, "Is this true?" Wow. Quote tweet from Ali Alexander himself. a black conservative who tweeted, Kamala Harris is, quote, not an American black. She is half Indian and half Jamaican. I'm so sick of people robbing American blacks like myself of our history. It's disgusting. I think he went on to say that. Keneisha, I do think, I mean, it's a curious question of race in this country and who gets to identify. I mean, black is a misnomer, really, because of how diverse our own history is in our African American population. Is this a cheap shot? People are calling it the new birtherism. What do you think?
I think it's problematic, and I think that the goal of the tweet, like the goal of some of the Russian interference with 2016, is to sow discord in African American communities and make sure that we don't turn out to vote. In particular, to make sure that we don't turn out to vote for Democratic candidates. I think to the extent that the African American community is divided, those conversations get simplified in public. My father is Haitian, my mother is African American. When I walk down the street, or you might have just learned that just now, right?
Yeah, sure.
And so people don't see me and think, oh, she's not African American. She is. My black experience is with me all day, every day. And I don't think it does anybody any good to kind of be separating us out about who is this kind of black or that kind of black. I think that only hurts the bigger agenda in the end.
I remember back when these similar questions were raised about Barack Obama and whether he was black enough. Right. I remember Stephen Colbert said something very funny. He was like, well, if there's why doesn't he just run as a white guy then? Because we know people who vote for white guys, right?
Well, I think it's Madeline. It's like,
the point being, you don't have a choice,
don't go
right?
There. Yeah. Just don't go there.
Yeah,
There's no need.
And I genuinely, this is a genuine question.
Yeah.
Would this tweet have gotten traction had Don Jr. not retweeted it, right?
Yeah,
isn't this just kind of the very far fringe left that when someone does publicize it, the media, that's the whole news cycle today, right?
Yeah.
Whereas, and is it really even, I mean, yes, of course it's slander and birtherism, but the main hook for it is the fact that they love to get to bring up that Trump was also a birther about Obama, right? So that's kind of the news hook that they love to, it wouldn't have really gotten the air.
But isn't that fair? I mean, given his history, that is what makes it relevant because he has a bad track record on this very issue. So yeah, when you see them going down a similar direction,
but
course
like
it
she
becomes
said about
a
it
news
being
item.
similar to Russian interference, the main traction that this got was from bots. Like how much more airtime are we going to give to bots?
I think that's a fair point. The way I look at it is if this starts to come out of Trump's mouth, then absolutely, it's something that really is legitimate. I mean, from the president's son, I follow Trump Jr. on Twitter. He looks at a lot of this stuff. He's just his Twitter feed is oppo against Democrats. I don't think he thought anything of it. Whenever, like, I know him personally, I don't think that he was that he knew what he was elevating, and that's the reason that he deleted it.
What do you think, Keneisha?
I'm more suspicious, right? I think that Donald Trump Jr. Might not speak for his father, but I don't think he's that far away from it. And I think that elevating this, whether it happened through bots or whether it happened because different parts of the media elevated it, means that it's there now. And we can't escape what happened in 2016. It happened, right? And that we're having this conversation at all means that it's something that we have to deal with now. And I think it was wrong for him to retweet it. I think the tweet doesn't make sense.
I'm glad he retweeted it. Let's also move on. We have to talk about Mayor Pete. He's raised in a whopping $24.8 million in his second fundraising quarter from the White House, despite the fact that, in our poll, he's number 5 in the Morning Consult poll. He's also number 5. I mean, how does a guy with only 6% of the Democratic likely voters raise the same number? President Trump raised $24.8 million in a single day. But still, I mean, it's a whopping campaign charge. He says $22 million on hand. What is the appeal of Mayor Pete? I really don't get it.
I think Mayor Pete gives folks a little bit of what they want from Joe Biden. It's like, this is a nice looking candidate. He's youngish. He's saying things that are progressive, but not like too progressive. He himself is diverse as a person who's in a same-sex marriage. And so I think he has things that people think are electable. And so it's a place to go if you're not comfortable with the other candidates.
I think he is tailor-made, like out of a factory for donors to love.
For wealthy whites, right?
For wealthy white donors to love. I mean, he's got the Midwestern thing, which can't imagine Midwestern voters actually responding that well to him. But
I mean,
but he's from the Midwest.
Indiana,
he's
he would
diverse.
lose by
he's got
digits.
this McKinsey consulting. I mean, he's just he speaks however many languages or whatever.
He doesn't even speak them.
Tailor-made for the donor community. They love this guy.
Yeah, he has everything. He has Harvard, he has the veteran, and I was listening to a really progressive podcast yesterday, and they were saying our gay friends don't even really like him. So I think it is, I think it is like the wealthy white heterosexual couples that are giving their money to him, right? And
It's
so
like
that's
this
why he's raised so
fetishization
much.
of the elite, and they're like, and this is exactly the same thing. He's like, I read Ulysses, and everyone who like went to these colleges had Ulysses on their syllabus. Nobody read it, and they're like, oh, he read it. He's the best of us.
Right.
Yeah, he's like that is Mayor Pete's appeal.
Very smart guy. I'm not saying he's not, but yeah, I think he's, he speaks in a way that just goes right to the heart of that liberal elite. They love him.
Right.
Ladies, we love you. Thank you.
Yeah,
You
thank
speak
you
right to the heart of these hosts.
Yeah, that's right. You absolutely
Thank you
do.
guys. Coming up on the trip to the DMZ, new White House press secretary Stephanie Grisham got roughed up by North Korean guards.
And
pop back a little bit, I would say.
That was crazy. And in the U.S. Journalist Andy Ngo was the target of violence at Portland protests. We pay tribute to the 9/11 first responder Luis Alvarez. All of that before we go.